So after long sessions of different protocols, let's see how it goes into practice from production to audit to the whole the whole cycle from papers to production to the audit. So probably we can begin with quick intros and also put in some info about how typically the audit cycle at your respective companies. Probably the moment you get access to GitHub repo to what you promise and what's the end report look like. We would like to understand if there is some differences in approach.
Hello. Hey, hi everyone. It's my honor to be here. So I know it's late, so I will take my introduction very short. I'm Thanh from Verichains. So we are the security firm specialized in cryptography and blockchain protocol low-level audit. So talking about the audit process, I think it's quite standard, right? So normally from initial contact and NDA, then for sharing of the GitHub or documentations, and we go into the scoping discussions about the scope and objective of the audit. And then after that agreement, and we start into the quotation as well as like start the contract. Then when starting the project, normally we will first focusing on review of the documentation, the design architecture of the whole design, and then going further into like code review and deeper analysis of the issue. When we find the issue, most of the time from Verichains side, right, we will go further into trying to look at the potential impact of the vulnerability and whether we can see we can build the proof of concept, chaining different issues that we found during the audit to make it like some kind of like working proof of concept for to share with the client. And then having the client to have the time to fix the issue and verify that. So I think that's quite standard for most of the audit company.
Anything different which CertiK does?
Yeah, so first, my name is Kang Li. I'm the Chief Security Officer from CertiK. So in terms of the auditing process, right, it's pretty much similar to lots of other form. I'm just going to emphasize some difference. So when the project come, open the repo, we actually have an onboarding process that actually also goes there to negotiate the scope. The scoping sometimes is not like the user gave us or the project owner gave us, especially for MPC. We have audit project, they only give us a client. We are talking about MPC, we only have one party. So we often, in that case, will insist, give us the other party, otherwise we cannot audit. And there's also a case they gave us only the library, not the how to use it. So that time we can go ahead, but we want to also see the whole application. So just one clarification on that part. And also we emphasize one piece on the process is the threat modeling. We want to show that, talk about not only on the algorithm part, we look at lots of effort on the implementation, the systems surrounding their application, the MPC one, and also really other functions related to the MPC solution. And when you have an MPC algorithm, but when you implement it, usually it serves for a certain purpose, and we have to know those as well. And the rest is probably very similar to others. We have findings, we show to the customer, we show our understanding, we have a conference call with them, and sometimes we are wrong, sometimes they're wrong, so we make recommendations, and after they get change, we continue to do the auditing. We have our own portal, so we show the report, and even after we finish auditing, sometimes we still talk to the client. So I just want to stop there too long.
What is Joop?
So I'm Joop van der Pol. I work at Trail of Bits, where I'm on the cryptography team. I think they already mentioned what the typical process looks like. I guess what I want to add is, indeed, it's very important to define the scope. Typically, this happens before the audit, during the sales process. And maybe I should make it clear that there's no such thing as a typical audit in this sense. So every customer wants something else. And it's very important to manage expectations. So if you expect from an audit firm to find 0 days in a protocol from an academic paper, you might be disappointed, because that's maybe not really our job. On the other hand, it does happen in audits that you find these kind of things. So it's not that it's impossible. It's just that if you go in expecting that this will happen, you may be disappointed, because it might not end up what will actually happen. Maybe another thing is that it's also important when the audit starts to have a good onboarding process, where you discuss with the customer, maybe on a technical level, what exactly, as you mentioned, the threat model is. So is it MPC running on somebody's computer, or is it running in an enclave? Do you care about side channel attacks? Do you not care about side channel attacks? All these kind of things you have to discuss up front, so that you get most out of your audit. There's also, we like to recommend our customers to prepare for their audit. So you get the most out of an audit if you prepare for it well, by which I mean that you prepare your documentation, prepare your code base, you take care of some low-hanging fruit before you have us look at it. Otherwise, we'll just start reporting this low-hanging fruit, which you could have solved by yourself. And yeah, the end result will be some report where we have some findings and we discuss the findings with you. And hopefully this will help you strengthen the security of your product. I think that captures it pretty well.
Hello, I'm Mikerah. I'm founder and CEO of Hashcloak. I guess to reiterate what everyone said, pretty much just the same auditing process that we follow. I think the main differences for us is that we mainly focus on people who build applications using MPC, not just like general threshold based systems, but like dark pools or anything else that they're interested in building. And in general, when you're building applications using MPC, it's a much more like different process than building, say, smart contracts or ZK applications. You need to consider like the different places in which your application might leak information. So I would say, like, for our process, we try to prepare a checklist ourselves based on the client's description. And then to like his point about having the client prepare, we also have them prepare a list of documentation and their own concerns. So we provide the client with a list of documentation with like their threat models, what their concerns are. And then based off that, we'll provide the audit with the same process that everybody else described.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so moving ahead, we would like to touch one of the key aspects, which is also one of the core theme of DeCompute as well, why we are starting this. There is an inherent incentive mismatch between academia, research in academia, engineering companies which are building MPC protocols, right? So the mismatch is this. Academia is incentivized to publish more papers and design unique and novel algorithms which can be appreciated. And they have another mechanisms to get reward, which is form of faculties or grants. And companies have incentives to quickly implement the best peer-reviewed papers. And there is an inherent trust between academia and companies. And what do you feel here? What's the role of audit companies? Because like we have been talking, audit companies won't be finding something which is super out of the paper, right? Not finding something which is equivalent to a vulnerability which is not mentioned in the paper. And papers don't have exact details of sub-protocols. They might not be best optimized. So what's the role of audit company? Or do you feel there's a need of another third party to address this incentive mismatch?
So my first thought was mainly thinking from like the academic side of things. Like in academia, there's like, when you write a paper, there's an incentive to not just present a protocol, you also need to write a proof. And one thing that we found to be very common in Hashcloak is that a lot of the proofs, like it doesn't seem like anybody's vet them outside of like maybe the reviewers. They might have just skipped the proof. And so oftentimes the proof has sort of details that will help with the actual audit. And so there isn't that many, outside of like auditing firms, there aren't that many incentives to read proofs to protocols. So I think that's where audit companies really shine. But that also depends on like the expertise of your team and their experience with mathematical proofs.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I would add on to that actually this is a failure of academia because academia should be checking these proofs. So I think from my point of view, the goal of these academic papers is to come with a security proof, and the security proof should be checked by academia. Obviously, it takes a lot of work to check these proofs, and it's probably not realistic to expect, let's say, peer reviewers to see it during the limited time that they have to do peer review. But there is some incentive for academics to point out flaws in security proofs at a later time because it allows them to publish another paper saying that they found a flaw in the proof. So in some sense, expecting auditing firms to do this, maybe it will lead to something good, but I expect that you will be disappointed. I mean, we also review security proofs at Trail of Bits sometimes, but we say to our customers that, you know, this is a time box thing. We try our best, based on our experience, to find something here, but there's no guarantee that we will find everything in these kind of security proofs. As to the question, like, what should we expect from audit companies? Well, as you say, it's all about incentives. So what you can expect from audit companies is that they will do whatever you will pay them to do. So if you want them to do something, then you say in the scope, this is what we want you to do, and an audit firm might tell you, okay, this is something that we can conceivably do, or they will say, okay, if you want us to do this, you will have to pay for 30 engineer years of work, and yeah, then we can do this particular thing. And then you can decide, okay, maybe I don't want to pay for 30 engineer years of work, so instead I'm going to have you do something a bit less, a bit more constrained, and then we can actually pay it, and you should do that instead.
So I came from an academia background before I joined CertiK. So I'm going to, just for the sake of panel discussion, I will say I disagree with my colleague from Trail Bits. I think, I won't say academia is wrong, right? I mean, you do your job, you invent new algorithm. And what auditing are serving, not you, actually auditing are actually serving for the product team. Now, of course, I also agree that you should put in more proof in it, I hope. But as academia, I'm not a cryptographer, but I work in other system bug finding area. It's too much effort to get your paper accepted. I may actually get your paper rejected because people don't want to read it, right? But I come back on. I want to say I agree with what my friends in Trailbits says. Auditors are not trying to find zero bug for your algorithm. That's lower your expectation on there. And in fact, again, I want to repeat. We are actually more likely the customer for those product team, not the algorithm team. Algorithm inventor, and very often at least for the MPC related product we reviewed, all the product will actually find serious bugs. Unfortunately, I have to say this, and I have to tell you, the MPC implementation right now is in the early stage. But I also want to tell you the problem we find mostly are not in the algorithm, but actually in the functionality used. I can tell more story later, I guess, the time if permit, right? So what's the incentive, or what's the mismatch in the incentive? Well, I believe auditing are now trying to give you like a bug-free certificate. I hope the colleague here agree that if some people gave you a claim to say, we'll give you a hacking-free or bug-free guarantee, you should run away, right? Auditing firms are not there to give you that, but we're there to help you find the potential problem, lower your risk. So auditing gave you like a competitive advantage. It's your product team. They should do it by themselves. They should do auditing in their development cycle. If they cannot, if they don't have the resource, don't have the expertise, they seek external help. We help them to reduce the risk. And then that also certainly in a way, auditing firm can also share some of the liability with your product team. So if something bad happens, at least they follow the best practice. But we are now there to find the 0 day in your algorithm. We want to, but that's that's hopefully explain the incentive.
I think I share with Kang and the rest of the panelists. So basically, the expectation from the audit firm is basically have to identify as much as possible security issue or weakness in the project and applications, or maybe identify or verify the implementations again by paper and so on. It's not really, most of the time we can find the issue inside the paper itself, right? But then most of the time the issue will be fallen into the implementations. Or, you know, like because of the issue is like their MPC is a relative new, right? And engineer most of the time we need to figure out or decide by their own the way they're going to implement the algorithm or the protocol. So that's why most of the time the issue will be around that. But then again, like Kang just raised, right? There's no bug-free application anyway, right? And one audit firm maybe missed something. So I think that one of the key things is probably choosing a multiple audit to reduce the risk. And also, one of the common misunderstanding that the projects pass the audit is actually secure, right? But in fact, we are audit company and we do whatever the client asking us to do. And in many cases, the scope of the project is actually reduced to some specific component or some specific function, not really the full project. That part is actually one of the part that we really take a lot of time when discuss in the scope of the project in the beginning to make sure that the scope it cover good enough amount of area that we find as most critical. But however, right, the scope of the project is always decided by the client, right? We do whatever client asking for. And I think that most of the people will not really read the report when there's a report out there and not really looking at the thing that left unfixed. Most of the time maybe like low security issues or some, let's say, governance or centralization issue, but eventually those kind of issues may turn into something critical by changing a number of different low severity issues or, you know, like abuse by the project itself. So those kind of things, I think that really need to be changed, right? That you really need to look at. And for the project, they have many reasons as well, right? Let's say this is low severity issue and they have constraint in the timeline to project to be released and so on that they say they won't fix in the now or maybe they may fix in the future, but eventually maybe that bug will never be fixed. And someday, I mean, if even low severity issue that no exploit, but it's not like unexploitable anyway, right? It's at some point someone will find a way to fix to exploit that. So that's my ad.
Okay. Right. Seems we need someone to be incentivized to particularly tackle this. Not surely may not be academia. Right. But yeah, given we are talking about MPC audit particularly, one thing which we have been noticing and have been learning from different communication is that companies which are implementing different MPC protocols, they do make some tweaks, particularly at communication layer, because MPC is very chatty in general. So people do tweaks at whether it's a peer-to-peer broadcast or broadcast communication, or there is some change in the architecture, whether there is a coordinator or not. So how do audit companies handle those tweaks? If you are directly complying and comparing paper versus code implementations, and paper hardly will have those details, so what do you feel? What's the role currently you are taking in, and what do you feel it can be fixed with?
So many people, they don't really have the detailed outline on the communication, for example, part of the protocol, right? And I mean, depending on the product or business model, as well as the threat model of the application, there could be multiple different variants of implementations of that communication protocol. So normally, when we look at the audit, we will basically following, let's say, the part of like whether in the paper there is any security constraints or assumption, or strictly in terms of security requirement, and those will be normally will be first looked into the audit to make sure that the protocol, the communication design as well as implementation following strictly those security requirement or constraint or assumption. But then eventually, I mean, we try our best to following that paper as well as the best practice in implementation of that kind of protocol. But there definitely will be no way that there is like we can find all of the issues, right?
For the tweaks on the algorithm,
Mostly on the communication part. That's where people do tweak.
right. So since I mentioned the tweaks, so I just remember one case. I only see one tweak. Most of the time, the thing we see that divert from the algorithm or the protocol is that if the paper does not specify very clearly, say, where does random number come from, right? So that's one aspect we certainly review. And I think that's sort of like our expertise. But come back to the first sentence I mentioned, there's a tweak. We actually ran into a situation, one implementation changed a multiplication to a plus. And we asked them why. In that case, we have to consult our in-house cryptographer, and we also have to communicate with the developer. And the reason they said is they're actually changing a two-party to an n-party, so that's why they do. So we try to follow their intuition. At the very end, we did not give them like a, we did not claim this as a finding of like a bug, but we do remind them that this is definitely that word. But most of the effort, I think our contribution are not on those. Our contribution is more like on the early one, the threat modeling. Then we say, okay, the paper say you should get a random number, but where do you get it, right? Did you just use a timestamp, or did you call the URN like a real good random service? Those type of things. And also, more likely, we actually find the difference between the implementation and the proposed protocol. So those are the place. There are other stories, but again, I want to save time.
So I agree with what my colleague said. And I would add to that the following, that this is ultimately, again, about scoping and expectations. So typically, one way that audit companies add value is that they see a lot of products, and therefore they see a lot of problems. And as you said, like you can build a kind of checklist of things that you should check. On top of this, also, let's say, the better audit firms will be able to look beyond the checklist. So they will be able to look at common problems, see what the tweak is like, and see how the common problems and attacks can be kind of adapted to potentially attack this tweaked version of the protocol. But again, in some cases, the conclusion might just be, okay, this tweak means you don't fall under the security proof in the paper. And what that means is unclear. It would take time and effort to figure out exactly what is the implication of this. Whereas in other cases, it may result in, okay, because of this tweak, we can apply this attack, and therefore you shouldn't do it. Or, well, this tweak is similar to what was done in this system, and there have not been any attacks published on that system, so we think it should be okay. But yeah, since there's no proof, you're still on your own, but at least here's some, in the end, that's what audit companies provide, let's say some assurance. So here you have some assurance that this is okay, or here you have some reason to believe why this might not be okay.
So yeah, going back to the point about scoping, sometimes the client specifically comes to us just for like this tweak to check that the tweak is correct and doesn't break too many assumptions. Sometimes the tweak does break, a few assumptions. For example, like abortion in MPC protocol is like a very common feature to have. And usually what you want is if you do abort on one party, you want to do abort on like all parties. And sometimes the networking layer just doesn't respect that. And that's something that we just need to like check for. But yeah, I agree with everybody's points here. I don't have much to iterate on.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so in the interest of time, just last one, if you have any weird story, any one of you from the audit, you can share.
I have one, I think, that fit for this audience. So I think lots of time the problem is not about your algorithm, it's about how they use your algorithm. So we have and also I want to say another thing I was hoping to have time to say. Lots of time we find it's in the product, not at the time when you generate the key or use the key to do the MPC. It's at the backup time because you really change the backup scheme. So we ran into a particular customer, and by the way, the problem fixed. But they are dealing with the backup. So we have a two-party, it's a centralized exchange. They try to reduce the decentralization. But we're talking about backup. You don't want to have the backup at the same location, right? Because that creates a centralization problem. Then here's the problem. They decide to use a threshold signing. They do a 2-3, right? So in this way, they feel like, okay, I don't, if you lose one, I can still recover. Now, here's the question throw back to you. What's wrong with having two-party use a 2-3 threshold? Right? I mean, all the algorithms, 2-3 threshold sounds perfect, right? But you only have two-party. You have 3 key, right? And does that solve your centralization risk? I think this audience should be clear, right? That's kind of things we look at, and we're really looking at the problem with the product, how they use it, right? And does it make sense? Very often, even your algorithm is very safe. The way to use it sometimes gave you, like the weird situation. So just, I have more example to share, but I will save the time.
Okay, probably Joop has one, the last one.
So I think I already insulted all academicians here by saying that it's all their fault. So now I'm also going to insult some implementers maybe, or maybe not. So typically, one of the most common issues you find in audits is that in implementations, some checks are missing. And this is a very broad term, like everything needs to be checked, like zero knowledge proofs, whether certain things are 0 or 1, these kind of things. So that's by far the most common issue in these kind of MPC audits. But I want to tell a kind of funny opposite story, which is where we were looking at some implementation, and we saw a check that we had not seen before. So it was just checking that the length of something was correct or something like this. And then we thought, oh, that's interesting. Why would this check be there? And then we thought, oh, if this check is not there, then you have some issues. And then we started looking at other implementations. It's like, oh, these people don't have this check. So, well, there are issues. So I guess this is maybe a funny opposite case where looking at an implementation that did it even better than we were expecting caused us to find problems in other implementations that we weren't even looking at.
Interesting indeed. Perfect. So yeah, we won't wait everyone for more while. Thank you very much to every one of you. Let's fix whatever is unbroken and build a better system with better incentives. Thank you very much.